Welcome to Chapter 5. You'll notice our background music today is a little bit different, probably a little more familiar to some of you. It's Baroque music, frequently considered in the West to be a music that enhances one's intelligence. Although intelligence, as you've learned in this chapter, is also a culturally relative concept, and in fact in some cultures, intelligence is not valued nearly as highly as social skills and just plain niceness. What we're going to be talking about today is the concept of national character and cultural themes, which is a bit confusing. The idea of national character has been around for a long time. This is basically the notion that people from another culture, another country, can be defined on the basis of their character types, which are in some qualitative way different from the character of those in the United States. For example, you may consider people from another culture as being more aggressive, or being nicer or politer, or being more reserved, or even more intelligent. These national character types have found absolutely no basis in scientific research. In fact, particularly when you're talking about issues of personality, psychologists find that the same big 5 factors in terms of personality characteristics are relatively universal. These 5 factors are conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and extroversion. These personality traits exist in approximately the same proportions in all cultures. Why is it then that we perceive another culture to have different types of people than ourselves? Why is it that they seem so different if their underlying personality traits are no different than ours? Well, one of the differences, and a concept that's become popular in anthropology more recently, is that of cultural themes. And that is the idea that within certain cultures, particular behaviors, personality traits, or character types are preferred. They may still not be dominant. There are many things in our culture that are preferred behaviors that nevertheless don't represent most of our population. But nevertheless, because these are the preferred character types in a population, they are the types that are overrepresented in the media, in the writings, in people's discussions, and therefore in terms also of what parents teach their children they're supposed to be like. The result is people who may behave differently, particularly on the surface, but when you really get to know them, when you look at the course of their behavior over a lifespan, you realize that their underlying personalities, as a group, are no different than those people that you're familiar with. There are, however, as I mentioned, some differences in terms of preferences, in terms of what societies would like people to be like. In our society, there's a preference for individualism, people who can separate themselves from others, who can go away to school, move across the country for a job, think for themselves, grow up to be something their parents never would have recommended and maybe never even heard of. These types of individualistic behaviors are encouraged from a very young age, when children are put to sleep in a separate room, a separate crib, encouraged to feed themselves, to speak up for themselves, to dress themselves at a very early age, to separate, in effect, from their parents. In other cultures, groupism is preferred. The idea that children should remain dependent or close to their parents for their entire lives, continue to seek the advice and wisdom of their parents even in adulthood. In these cultures, children typically sleep with the parents, or at least in the same room. They're fed and dressed to a much older age. They're encouraged to remain close and not to speak as much in response to what their elders say to them, but instead to obey. In cultures such as this, many people possess what's called a relational ego. They don't think as much about themselves independently from their family, and instead when they think about themselves, they think about themselves as a mother, a sister, a daughter, a son, a brother. And these are the more salient concepts in terms of how they plan their future. Individuals with a relational ego are no less human, have no different character in terms of their personality styles. They're just taught to think first in a very different way. In Thailand, where I did much of my research, the word I although it exists particularly in a written form, is rarely used in a conversation. Instead, in a conversation, an individual might refer to themselves as Duan's daughter, Gop's sister, Ma's niece, and they would refer to themselves, instead of saying I, by their relationship to another person. This is a significant difference from American culture, where I seems to be the most common word we say, and me, mine, seem to be the first words out of a toddler's mouth. These differences extend also to a classroom situation, where expectations are different in terms of whether children ask questions or whether children simply listen and follow instructions according to what their elders tell them to do. Again, the personalities don't differ, but the behaviors may differ. All of these are simply different methods of othering, making people different from yourselves. If you believe them to have different types of personalities, different underlying mechanisms for being human, then you tend to think of a person as being significantly different, and therefore an other, somebody not like you. If, on the other hand, you understand that these are simply culturally taught behavior patterns that can be changed, and that were we to live in one of those cultures would even change for us, then you think quite differently about other people, as being basically human